All right, folks, it is my great pleasure and honor here today on Do You Know Jack to have the one and only man, myth, and or legend, Satan and Blitzkrieg frontman Brian Ross on the line with me via Skype. How you doing, man?
Hi there.
It's a new world when we're I'm all the way over here in northern Canada, and you're
Yeah,
where it's minus 30 degrees Celsius right now.
good Lord.
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, it's cold here, but not that cold.
Yeah, I would imagine. I've never. I've been out to the UK once, and it was just I stepped out of Heathrow for 2 seconds on a connecting flight, and then I was right back in again, trying to grab a flight back to Canada. So can't say I've ever
Okay,
experienced the the awesomeness that is your country, but perhaps one day I shall.
you should. You should.
So listen, man. I mean, like every maybe metalhead that has a any kind of inkling of understanding of how things work historically should know this. But I didn't realize that you were the critically acclaimed frontman of Blitzkrieg. I guess I should apologize off the top for not knowing that.
Well, that. So, yeah, I'm sure that there must be some people out there that aren't aware of some of the parts of my career, of which Blitzkrieg is only one of them. Satan being another, of course, and also one of my greatest heroes of all time, Alice Cooper. I get to play Alice in a stage show
Uh huh.
here in England as well every now and again. So that's really cool.
Well, now I was going to ask you about that. I mean, because your voice kind of has a bit of a signature baritone quality about it. Of course, you can screech up into the high registers as well. But I mean, I would imagine now when you are Alice, that you kind of get that more sneering vocal line down.
Yeah, I mean, I personally I prefer not to comment on my own performance as Alice, but other people tell me that I sound exactly like him, and including Alice himself.
Wow.
Alice, Alice, he's well aware of what we do, and he loves it. He thinks it's great. So I had sent a few months ago, in fact, just over a year ago, I sent Alice a photograph of me dressed as him. And he obviously did a bit of homework and he got a hold of a couple of photographs of me when I was over in the States with Satan. And he went out and bought the clothes that I was wearing on that tour. And he had a photograph taken and sent it over and said, "Here's me as you." So that was quite an honor. It was a real honor. The guy he's just something else. He's rock royalty really, and so to have him in your corner, appreciating your work, is really something special.
No doubt, no doubt. Now, just for the sake of folks that don't know, it seems like Blitzkrieg and your history with that group came along first, and then there was a bit of a split, maybe around '81, and that's kind of how you got in with Satan for the Court in the
Yeah,
Act record. Do I have my facts straight there?
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, basically, Blitzkrieg actually technically only existed for just over a year.
Mm-hmm.
And we achieved quite a lot in that year from 1980 to 81. We achieved quite a lot. We attracted record company interest. Saxon's label at the time, Carrera Records, wanted to sign us up, and that actually contributed to the band splitting up because Jim Serrato, the original guitar player, after a lot of deliberation, decided he didn't want to do that. So, and I kind of thought, well, without Jim, I don't want to do it. So the whole band just kind of fizzled out. And I went on to other things. But yeah, you've got that right. Blitzkrieg came first before Satan.
But now you're not a big fan of the new wave of British heavy metal, label. Perhaps it might be thrown around about Blitzkrieg or
Yeah,
Satan for that matter.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it is a label, and to me, I've read the arguments on Facebook about who's new wave of British heavy metal and who isn't, and quite frankly, I don't care because I mean, there was last week there was a huge argument following the release of Judas Priest's latest album. Are
Mm-hmm.
Judas Priest new wave of British heavy metal or not? Well, no, they're not. They were around well before, and the phrase "new wave of British heavy metal" would seem to suggest, by the name itself, that there was something before it, and Judas Priest were it.
Mm-hmm.
Black Sabbath were it. You know, there were several bands around that were just simply labeled as real or true British metal, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And the new wave kind of followed that. Now Blitzkrieg kind of was, as were Saxon, as were Raven. We were already there, just following in the footsteps of Judas Priest when someone came up with this label of new wave of British heavy metal, and it's kind of, I don't get annoyed about it. I mean, it's fine. I'm quite proud of my heritage, but
Yeah.
really, to me, it's just true British metal.
Yeah.
That's it.
I'm glad you mentioned Raven because I think, they were sort of label mates. I think Neat Records for a while
Yeah,
was kind of
but
snatching
they're
up a
still
lot
good
of.
friends of
Yeah, yeah.
mine.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
I think aren't they from relatively the same area of the world as the guys from Satan were? I think aren't they all from
yeah.
Newcastle
They're
upon
from
Tyne?
Newcastle.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're from Newcastle, which is kind of 8 miles away from me, where I'm sitting right now. Because I live in Washington, the original Washington in England,
Mhm.
which is kind of halfway between Newcastle and Sunderland.
Mhm.
So it's kind of sitting right in the middle. It's the home of George Washington's family, if you like, before they moved over to the States. But uh, yeah, I mean, Raven were from Newcastle, as were Venom. Satan, Avenger.
Were
Avengers is
Tigers of
slightly different.
Pantang from there as well? I'm trying to
Tigers of
remember.
Pantang were from Newcastle as well. Yeah, I mean, we were all together on the same label. We were all good friends and still are.
Uh-huh.
We still are good friends. So we see each other from time to time. We keep in contact with each other constantly, just to see what we're each other's doing. And when we've got a new album coming out, we'll let them have a listen and see what they think, and so on. So yeah, we were quite a close knit community, if you like.
Yeah.
And it was more than just Neat Records was more than just a label. It was kind of like a family.
Mhm.
And when you went into the studio, it was like it felt like home. It's kind of hard explaining that to someone that never actually went into Neat Records or the recording studio or was involved with it, but it really was like a family.
Mhm.
And that family still exists today, although Neat Records is no longer with us, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was this brief period of breakup where Blitzkrieg sort of split due to the differences about label choices, and you got on with the guys from Satan. I mean, how did you end up kind of working with those guys? Is it geographically because you live close and they kind of knew of your work with Blitzkrieg, or?
Well, they knew of my. They were fans of Blitzkrieg. They used to, whenever we played, because Blitzkrieg was originally based in Leicester,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of 180 miles south of Newcastle. And whenever we came up to the northeast for to record or do some gigs or whatever, whenever we did gigs, Satan were always there. And we got to know them because of that. But I didn't go straight from Blitzkrieg to Satan. There was 2 years. There was nearly 3 years between Satan and Blitzkrieg.
Yeah.
So I mean, before Satan and immediately after Blitzkrieg, I moved from Leicester back up to the northeast of England, and moved to Washington, where I still am.
Mm-hmm.
And I put together a band that I wanted to kind of follow on from where Blitzkrieg left off, but without being Blitzkrieg, and I came up with a name, and it was Avenger. And I got people in. I got Mick from Blitzkrieg to come and play bass on it, and so on. I got the offer from Satan to play with Satan, and I turned it down. And Satan kind of decided, no, we're not going to let it lie at that. And they told Avenger that I had already joined Satan, and that I was going to let them know that I was leaving Avenger, at which I was promptly fired from Avenger. It wasn't true, but you've got to admire Satan for their their balls, basically, for going ahead with that and saying, well, it wasn't true. And years later, people ask me, are you still annoyed about that? I was never annoyed about it, to be honest. I mean, they did what loads of other bands did. At the time, you needed a singer, you needed a guitar player, you had to poach them from other bands. That's the way it was. You know, if you wanted the people that you wanted, you had to pinch them from other bands. That's just the way it was. And I'm still great friends with the guys in Avenger as well. So, years on, it's great.
Yeah.
After that, I mean, after the Satan thing, Satan. I was only in Satan for a few years, and we did the Caught in the Act album.
Yeah.
And then moved on from there.
Let me ask you this now: was the name Satan in the era of the 80s in the PMRC, was that a hindrance to you guys being able to get gigs at the time? Because I know they did change their name at one point to Pariah from Satan.
They did, and yes, it was a bit of a problem, and that was actually quite instrumental in my exit from the band, because I got called through to Newcastle one night. For a band meeting, and I thought we're going to be talking about songs for the next album, which we did at first. When I first got there, we had a cup of coffee and we were talking about, we need to get the songs together for the next album and blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of, right, okay, well, before we go any further with talking about what the next album is going to be, what the songs are going to be, we need to discuss the name. And I said, well, what's the problem with the name? And the guys were saying, well, you know what the problem is. We're being we're being shut out. Some magazines won't review the albums. Some people won't come along to the gigs because of the name. And I said, well, I don't think we should change the name. I think phases come and go. A good name doesn't. And to me, Satan is the ultimate name for a heavy metal band. It always has been, and it probably always will be.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. And I was totally against changing the name of the band, totally against it. Then they hit me with the bombshell of, well, we want to start to sound more like Bon Jovi. We want to be more American because we want to hit the American. And we think that by being heavy, British, we're not going to get anywhere. We need to sound more like Bon Jovi than Judas Priest. So I said, I totally disagree with that as well. I am not going to change the musical direction of the band, and I am not going to change the name. So the manager of the band said, in that case, you're fired. Wow. That was the end of my involvement with Satan. And again, am I annoyed about it? No, because they did what they felt and believed was right. And when somebody does something because they believe that it's right, you can't be annoyed. Yes, I was upset. Yes, I was upset about it, and I felt really down about it. But they did what they thought was right, and I think that's fair enough, and I don't have a problem with that. Yeah. So I just kind of went on to do other things from there on. And my parting shot to them was, well, I'm going to put out a new album as soon as I can. You put an album out as soon as you can, and we'll see which album does the best. That was my parting shot. As it turned out, my album did better, much better than the Blind Fury one did.
Yeah.
But that's another story.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was thinking like Blitzkrieg isn't necessarily the most, politically correct name either, though, is it?
No, it isn't. But it depends. It depends really what your viewpoint is. Because when I first joined Blitzkrieg, the band was called Split Image, and I really didn't like the name. And I said to the guys, look, I'm more than happy to join the band. I love what you're doing, but really, let's be serious. We've got to change the name of this band. We cannot go out to Split Image. It's nondescript. It's not interesting. It's not going to grab us at any attention at all.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately, the manager of the band went off to sort of find a new name for the band. So for a while, we were going out to Split Image, playing around the Midlands in England, and so on. And then he came into a rehearsal one night and said, I've got it, I've got it, I've got it. So I said, well, okay, what is it? And he said, I think you better sit down, all of you. So we did. We sat down, put the instruments to one side. And he said, okay, the new name of the band, I suggest, should be Blitzkrieg. There was silence. There was absolute total silence. I looked at Jim Serotto. He looked at me. And he was kind of, we can't. And I said, what the hell does that mean? And he said, well, it's a German word. I said, I know it's a German word. Do you know what it stands for? And he said, yes, I know what it stands for as far as the war is concerned. But if you take the literal meaning of the word, then it kind of fits us quite well. So I said, all right, come on, you're going to have to explain this. So he set off to explain it. He said, look, the word Blitzkrieg from the German means fast attack. He said, we are a fast attack. We play songs quite quickly. We attack an audience. It's a fast attack. Lightning warfare is the other word, the other meaning of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, we do go at the speed of light, lightning, whatever. And it kind of, we thought about it and we thought, yeah, it's good. It's good. And from that moment on, from 1980 up to the present day, I have spent a lot of my life defending the name because of the other meaning of it. And really, it's nothing to do with, Hitler's invasion of the rest of Europe or what the atrocities that were done to certain races and people. Far from it. We're not identified with that at all. I think most people have got the right idea now that it's kind of taken from the literal of being a fast attack, or a lightning war, and that's fine. I mean, there's worse. I think there's worse names than that. In America, the very first time I played in America, I was astounded at the amount of bands that had the word anal in their names. I was astounded by them. There was loads of them. I'm not going to say them here. I think we both know what they are.
Yeah.
And I think, quite frankly, they're worse and worse than Blitzkrieg. But Blitzkrieg is nothing to do with Nazism or anything like that. Anybody that knows me will know that I'm quite the opposite kind of person.
Uh-huh.
I'm a peace-loving sort of guy, and I don't agree with war at all. So it's kind of, that's where it lies. And yes, we did have a few problems with it. Not as much as Satan did with Satan, I must add. But
yes.
Blitzkrieg throughout the years have had a few problems with it. I think about 10 years ago, we did a tour in Germany, and we went out into the old areas of Germany where people were burning our posters and stuff,
Yeah.
So, I mean, these things do occur, but I think with a bit of education, people realize quite quickly when they read the lyrics and stuff that I write that I'm not like that at all.
Yeah. No, fair enough. And I mean, I never gleaned that from the name. And of course, you guys have got the universal Metallica stamp of approval too, so I'm sure that takes you a long way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that in itself, though, I love the guys dearly. They whenever they hear that I'm doing a new album with Blitzkrieg, they all, Lars, will pick up the phone and say, Brian, you got to send me a copy. And I said, of course I'm going to send you a copy. I always do.
Yeah.
So, um, you know, it's a double-edged sword though, because in some ways, it's been brilliant because it's brought the band to the attention of a lot of people that may not have been aware of us. But also, it's been a hindrance in the way that a lot of people believe that the song Blitzkrieg is Metallica's, not ours. And so a lot of people from time to time will say to me, can I ask you something? Why do you do a cover of the Metallica song Blitzkrieg? It infuriates me. It really does infuriate me. And the question that most people ask, so I guess you're probably going to be reaching for your pencil here to scribble it out, is what do I think of Metallica's version of Blitzkrieg? That is probably the most asked question. I'm just joking, by the way. If you do want to ask that question, fire away. I don't have a problem with any questions that you want to ask.
No.
But that is the most asked question in interviews that I've had since Metallica did the cover of Blitzkrieg.
Huh. Well, and now from my perspective, and I don't want to dwell too much on this because we got a lot more to talk about, but I think, they don't even do it accurately, right? Like there's a few things in there that, I guess you could argue they make it their own, quote unquote, but they're not, recreating the chord progression and everything to the letter.
Yes. I mean, I spent over an hour on the phone with Lars dictating the lyrics to him so he could write them down, and they still got it wrong. And some of the chord progressions are wrong as well. But hey, it doesn't matter. They've put, as you've just said, they've put their own stamp on it, and I think it's great. It's when we did the cover, we did a cover back. I wanted to do a Metallica song for years. I wanted to do one as a thank you and sort of like a tip of the hat to them. So when we got the opportunity to do it, we did it. But we did it as accurately as we possibly could because that's the way I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess I've asked the unasked question. I think it's a great version.
Yeah, fair enough. As we're talking about this, it reminds me of a band, a thrash metal band, called Believer. And of course, just recently, the band Imagine Dragons has written a song called Believer, which is, it's not even metal. It's, the typical stuff you'd expect from Imagine Dragons. So being the tongue-in-cheek band that, Believer is, they've written a song called Imagine Dragons. Is there a Blitzkrieg song in the works, maybe called Metallica, just, for the same?
No. No, there isn't.
That was a complete non-question. I was just being sassy.
Yeah, I know. You just had to put it out there, though. No, I've never even thought about it, but I probably not. I did a song called Metalizer many years ago, which was a song about Judas Priest, and which actually is the name of my solo band. Whenever I have time, I go out and play in my solo band. But the last few years, I really haven't had the time to do it. But Metalizer is their name. That's the closest to Metallica you're going to get, I think.
Well, now fast forward some 30-odd years, and you've got a new lineup of Blitzkrieg, and you guys are getting ready to release a new full-length, of course, called Judge Not, coming out April 27th on Mighty Music. This is exciting. I guess, the key question just to lead into this is, you've been working with Satan as well since, them coming back with the 2013 Life Sentence. I guess you could call that somewhat of a reunion record. So, I mean, what's the difference in your approach between the two bands?
It's really, really hard because the last two albums, I've been in the studio at the same time doing Satan songs and Blitzkrieg songs. We really tried to separate the two things so that we were recording at different times.
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't work out that way. So I found myself going into the studio on the afternoon, putting a few Blitzkrieg songs, then going on to a different studio at the night and doing a couple of Satan songs and so on. So it's kind of hard, but I don't know. It just happens. People ask me, um, what happened with Satan? How did it all come together? The weird thing is, it was kind of 28 years between Satan splitting up and us getting back together. 28 years.
Mm-hmm.
And 28 years in England is a life sentence, which is why the album's called Life Sentence. And the thing is, we got in the rehearsal room, and it just felt like yesterday. Whenever you put the five of us together, it just works. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that while I'm in the room with Blitzkrieg, it sounds like Blitzkrieg. As soon as I walk through the door into the room with Satan, it becomes Satan.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to sometimes it's difficult to sort of separate the two. But if you listen, they are actually totally different things. It's kind of, I guess, the only way I could describe it is that if I'm not suggesting that we are like these bands, but it's kind of Satan is Iron Maiden to Blitzkrieg's Judas Priest.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the kind of difference, really.
Yeah. The dual leads that Satan puts out, and those guitars, they kind of, I think I said this to the other day when we were talking on Facebook, but they kind of buzz around you like little bees. I mean, thinking about the track off the latest record, My Own God. It's like, how many notes could they possibly fit in that riff, but somehow those guys actually make it work.
They do, and the remarkable thing is they're such great players. It's an absolute joy to work with these guys, and they write things that when they come up with ideas, they can almost hear me singing things in there, and so they write things that are going to work for my voice, and they'll there's little ideas. And then Russ comes over with with his guitar and plays ideas to me, and I'll start forming ideas for lyrics or song titles or whatever, And you're right. I mean, these guys are at the top of their game, really, and they play with total heart and soul. And I know it sounds a little crass, and it probably sounds a little bit, finger down the throat. But honestly, these guys breathe it, they live it, they eat it, and it's such a joy to work with them. It's a joy to work with the guys in Blitzkrieg as well. Of course it is. But you're asking about that, and what they do is kind of, they can take a riff and they can play it, and they'll fill it with a million notes. But if other bands tried it, it would sound an absolute mess, and they just make it work.
Yeah,
it's remarkable. It is remarkable.
It's amazing now, given their skill, that the band isn't maybe a little bit more in the forefront when you mention other bands of that nature like Iron Maiden and so forth.
Yeah,
because I mean, arguably, and I'm a huge Maiden fan, probably like 90% of the heavy metal world is, but what Steve Ramsey and Russ Tippins do on guitar is like it almost eclipses what the Maiden guys can do, or maybe it does.
Of course. Well, I'm going to upset you a tad here. I think it does. I'm not a Maiden fan, although Yannick is one of my best mates. I've known him for years, and he's I love the guy dearly. But I'm not a Maiden fan. I've always preferred Saxon, quite frankly. But that's another story.
Yeah.
It's another story. Again, Biff, he's a great guy, and so on. There was just something about Saxon appealed to me more than Maiden.
Mm-hmm.
I do like a lot of Maiden songs, mind. I have to say, I do like a lot of Maiden songs, but I wouldn't go out and buy every album. I'm not that kind of fan, really. But I think the thing, what you're saying, you have to understand the mentality of the music business in England. And England cannot deal or rather England's record companies cannot deal with more than one genre at a time. So whatever is the big thing, whether it be the Spice Girls or or the Pet Shop Boys or whatever it happens to be at the time, Justin Bieber or whatever, that's what they throw their heart and soul into.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's what they're into, they don't want metal. They don't want heavy metal bands because it doesn't fit into their little niche. So it's been like that for quite a while. And that was why record labels like Neat Records, Heavy Metal Records, and so on, why they sort of came out, because they wanted to put out things that were kind of being left behind by the record companies. And at the time, every major record company signed up one metal act just so that they had their finger in that pie. So, EMI signed Iron Maiden, but no other bands. And that's the way it worked. And it's still like that in England. So that is the reason why Satan or Blitzkrieg never rose to the heights that I personally think that both of those bands are capable of.
Yeah.
Because in England, the record companies aren't big enough to promote enough, which is why Satan and Blitzkrieg are now with labels outside of the UK, because those labels can put the heavy metal clout, if you like, behind the band to promote us on a little bit more. And I think that is a kind of a good move for both Satan and Blitzkrieg, really.
Yeah.
To get outside of the UK, really.
I was just thinking, like, if you look historically too, like Raven literally left the UK and moved to the United States, and I would imagine that would be why.
Same reason.
Yeah.
Exactly the same reason. Heavy metal kind of died, really, around the 1984-85 time when the American invasion happened. And love them or hate them, Bon Jovi, Mötley Crüe, whatever, they all came over here with their hair metal and completely destroyed metal totally. I mean, utterly.
Mm-hmm.
And it meant that bands like Blitzkrieg, Satan, Raven, Venom were kind of pushed right to the bottom of the pile. And so while that was going on, I mean, I couldn't get a gig for just over 20 years in England. We played it across Europe. We went to Germany and played extensively in Germany and Holland and so on. And Raven did the same thing, but they did it across the pond. They went across to America.
Yeah.
Because
they had that famous tour with Metallica, the Kill 'Em All for One tour.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was probably the reason why they went to America. I think because Metallica had said to them, "Well, look, why don't you move to America?" And I think whatever the reason, it was probably a great move for them. And I think they've survived because they've done that. We've survived because we kept on playing, and so on. A lot of bands fell by the wayside and completely disappeared.
Yeah,
because the record company involvement just wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, it's nice to see, Saxon and Raven, Blitzkrieg, Satan, even Tigers of Pantang are releasing some of their best material to date now again.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I like I said before, I've always liked Saxon, but now I think Saxon are better than they've ever been. They're terrific, but they're nothing. I mean, they're not the same kind of metal as Maiden. Maiden do their thing with the harmony guitars and stuff, and Saxon do their thing, which sometimes involves harmony guitar, but not as much as Maiden. So, there's room for everybody, I think, and it's nice to see that. And even the likes of Girls' School, they're enjoying a new tour and new albums and so on, which is great for the girls. They love it,
Yeah.
So it's kind of bizarre because we all know each other, and we're all talking to each other and saying, "Oh, we got a new album coming out. What do you think?" and stuff. So it's really cool. And you get to hear the great thing is, of course, you get to hear people's albums months before anybody else does. It's because they come out of the studio with a copy of it and they'll say, "Hey, have a listen to this."
Yeah.
And it's cool. It's really good.
Yeah. Well, now as you said in 2015 when you were working with Satan, you guys were also re-recording a time of changes. It was a 30th anniversary, and you were also sort of wrenching back your songs maybe from the major label that they were attached to, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, predominantly it upset me a bit, because the only way you could get a copy of A Time of Changes was to pay a ridiculous amount of money to a collector to persuade him to sell it from his collection. They weren't worried. They weren't bothered about the actual music that were contained on the album. They just wanted it because it was rare. And fair enough. I understand that these people exist, but I would rather that someone bought the album because they love it, not because it's worth something. And it was impossible to get the record company that now owns the rights to the original recording. It was impossible to get them to agree to a figure, an amount of money that we would pay them to allow us to do it. So we did the next best thing. We thought, right, what we'll do is we'll go back into the studio and we'll re-record the songs. So we're not releasing their version of them because the songs the actual songs themselves belong to me. Mm-hmm. But the actual recording belongs to the record company. So we just went in and re-recorded the album and made it available. And the crazy thing was, about 4 or 5 months after we released it, the record company then thought, it's starting to sell. And they reissued the original, which annoyed me a little bit because it's kind of like, well, if you'd let me do that in the first place, there wouldn't now be 2 copies of this thing floating around. It kind of becomes a thing. But I kind of, it upsets me and it annoys me to think a fan of the band was at the time was having to pay upwards of £250, £300 to get hold of a copy of A Time of Changes. And I thought, no, we'll re-record it and then they can get it for £15. Which pleased me, and that is the way it was, and that's the way it is, Mm-hmm. So yes, it was a little bit of a dig at the record company. I mean, it's owned by I'm trying to remember who actually owns it now. Universal.
Yeah,
Universal
I think you're
actually
right.
own them.
Yeah, I know it was a major. I remember reading that somewhere along the way. I just didn't write it down.
Well, they actually own all of the Blitzkrieg product up to Unholy Trinity. Unholy Trinity from that album on is still owned by what used to be Neat Records. Mm-hmm. Is now owned by Jess Cox. And then, of course, Theatre of the Damned was owned by Armageddon Records, which was a subsidiary of the Wacken Festival people. But I would love at some point to get all of the old recordings and get them all re-released because that would be really cool. Because there's so many people out there haven't heard some of the earlier albums, and it's it's something that I would like to put right if it's all possible.
Yeah. Well, now the fact that you went back and revisited that record, A Time of Changes, I mean, did that help you to keep the Blitzkrieg sound, reasonably authentic with the writing and recording of Judge Not?
Yeah, I think we've always kind of had that thing where whenever someone new has come into the band, I've kind of instilled into them that we have to retain a certain amount of the original sound and the direction of the band and what we're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. But it's nice when you have a young musician come in with all of the excitement and the vitality that these people have got. Sometimes it's nice to just give them a little bit of rein so that they can add their little touch into the mix, and so you've got a lot of originality, but they bring in a bit of freshness in there as well, which I think is most important.
Yeah.
And I think yeah. I mean, Judge Not in places does sound very much like an album that we probably could have done back in the '80s. But at the same time, it's got a lot of feel of new. I'm not gonna, I hate the phrase new metal, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's got that feel about it as well. So it's kind of good. I like that, and I think throughout the band's history, I've tried to retain that by retaining the band's identity, and what me and Jim originally set out to do, and what we wanted to achieve, and so on, with that kind of feel, with not over the top harmony guitars, but every now and again having a bit of harmony in there with the kind of vocal that I put in there, and so on, and keep the basic skeleton of Blitzkrieg from back then, but
Yeah.
sort of put something new in as well, just to keep things fresh, you know.
Yeah, well, now I noticed the newest member of the band, Matt Graham, he joined maybe around 2015. He looks like he's barely into his 20s. He looks like a pretty young fella.
Actually, he Matt was actually 21 Sunday gone. And we we all went out and had a great night out to celebrate his birthday, and that's really cool. But Matt is not actually the newest member of the band. The bass player, Hugh Holding, is the newest member of the band.
Oh,
He joined just before we signed the deal with Mighty Music, because the bass player that we had at the time, he was in a Metallica tribute band, but he also had his own band as well, and he just felt that he wanted to sort of branch off and do his own thing.
yeah.
So we found ourselves without a bass player. So I've known Hugh for a long, long time, and he's a great bass player. He's actually a lot like Steve Harris, the way that he plays and his approach to music. But he's also a lot like Mick Moore, who was the original bass player with Blitzkrieg. So with those two things added into the mix, it just adds that little bit more authenticity as well with it. So yeah, it works. But Matt, as I say, he's a young guy. He's 21 years old, just, and the amount of the amount of energy that he's brought to the band with the way that he plays drums, because it's just phenomenal, really.
Yeah.
And when you hear the new album, you hear the drums. It's just like, what is this guy doing? It's like unbelievably good.
Yeah. Yeah, well, now I would be remiss if I didn't mention too that your son Alan is in the band playing guitar. Does that create any unique challenges when it comes to the writing and recording of the material, Brian?
No, not really. I mean, in the band, he is not my son. He is just another musician. And we kind of agreed on that. Obviously, outside of the band, he's my son, and so on. And I'm very proud of what he does with and so on. But you have to stay focused, and if you can't have someone that is visibly getting more than their fair share of whatever, over and above everybody else. So it has to be seen that he's treated the same as everyone else. And yeah, if he does something wrong, I come down on him like a ton of bricks. And if I do something wrong, he comes down on me like a ton of bricks in a way that he would never get away with outside of the band, So yeah, he is a great guitar player. He's written a couple of songs on the new album. He did vocals on one of the tracks. He's a great singer.
Yeah.
He was the singer in a Deep Purple tribute called Deep Purple in Rock, doing mainly the Ian Gillan era. But so that kind of gives you an idea of what sort of a singer he is.
Yeah.
He came from the same stable as me, and I taught him I basically taught him as well. But some people are amazed at just how much he sounds like me when he sings. So it's great to have him on board. And he's really enthusiastic about the whole thing. And again, he's brought a breath of fresh air in. Um, it's just a joy to work with the guys. Um, Alan as well, not because he's my son, but because he's a great musician in his own right.
Yeah. Yeah, true, true. The other thing I was going to mention here is, just talking a little bit about the new record is that, lyrics wise, I've noticed, I think this is maybe true in Satan as well to a certain extent, but there's literary references here at play. For instance, I'm not sure how much I can reveal about the new record, but I mean, there's a song where you mentioned the character of Dorian Gray, and I actually had to,
Yeah,
Google search. I was like, who is he talking about here? And then I discovered it was an 18th century, 19th century Oscar Wilde novel
yes.
that you're referencing.
Well, anybody that knows me or knows anything about me knows that I write songs about things that interest me. So it could be a TV show, as in The Prisoner, or it could be movies, such as The Portrait of Dorian Gray or Interview with the Vampire,
Mm-hmm.
so on. V for Vendetta. I've written songs about all of these things. And um, Dorian Gray, the story of Dorian Gray is something that I've loved for years and years and years, and I've always wanted to write a song about it. And it was kind of, I had to wait until I heard, this is going to sound crazy. It works for me, but it might not work for other people. I don't know. But um, when I hear a piece of music, I get an idea from the flavor of the music what that song is about. And it's kind of the best way I can describe it is if you went to see a horror movie and the music playing, the incidental music playing in the background was from a Disney movie, it wouldn't work. And simply also, if you went to see Cinderella, you wouldn't want to hear a score that would be taken from a horror movie. The two things work together because they're synonymous with each other. And it's the same thing with my lyrics when I write to a piece of music. I listen to the piece of music, it tells me what the song is about, and then I start writing lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm trying to get to is for years, I've wanted to write a song about Dorian Gray, the story of Dorian Gray. And I've up till now never heard the piece of music that said to me, this is the song about Dorian Gray. With this album, Ken came up with this piece of music and said, listen to this. What do you think of this? And I said, that is Dorian Gray. And so I wrote the lyrics around that. And I like to tell, I've always liked to tell stories in the lyrics that I write. If you take them away from the music and just read them as a piece of prose or poetry or whatever, you can actually see the story and what I'm trying to say in there. And the whole idea is if that then inspires you to go and either read the book or go and watch the movie, then that's great because you'll get something from it. And while you're watching the movie, you'll go, oh, yeah, that's where he got that from. That's
Mm-hmm.
what that's about, you know. So yeah, I mean that's what I do, and the story of Dorian Gray is really quite a strong one. So
Yeah, for sure.
if you haven't seen the movie, go see it.
Yeah. Well, now I guess, in the near future for Blitzkrieg, I mean, like I said, Judge Knott's coming out on April 27th, but I noticed that Lisa Reed, who is a bandmate of Alan's in a different project, is sort of filming a bit of a documentary about the band, so that's exciting.
Yeah, been doing that, and she's been coming to rehearsals, and she's recorded warts and all. Obviously, for obvious reasons, she was not allowed to film any of the new songs.
Yeah.
But the old stuff that we've been rehearsing, she's recorded a lot of those. She's been doing some footage of us talking about the gear that we use. She's going to do an interview with me this weekend, and so on. And basically, it started out for she's at university, and for her college course in the music field, she had to do a documentary about a band. So she got in touch with us and asked us if we could we'd let her do it, and we were more than happy to let her do it. She's in her own right. She's a great guitar player,
Yeah.
but she's a lovely lady, and so we said, yeah, that's great, and it's turning out so good that I think we're gonna actually use it as well, and possibly put it up on the band's website or something like that, you know. But yeah, it's great. It's nice to do that, and so far we've enjoyed it immensely.
Right on. Yeah, I think she has a YouTube channel too that you can follow, and I'm not sure if the band has done
Yeah,
any posting about that on social media, but she's been posting a few updates here and there. And of course,
she has.
the project that we're talking about is called Main Attraction, which features
Mm,
your son Alan on vocals, pulling
yes.
off classic, I guess for lack of a better word, hair metal era stuff. And
Yeah.
I saw a pretty interesting interpretation of 18 in Life, and there Alan is, he's screeching up to the Sebastian Bach vocals. So, there you
Yeah.
go.
It's a great project. They're doing it. They're doing pretty well. They're getting out there and playing, and it's great. But he doesn't play guitar in that project at all. He's just the
Yeah,
singer,
yeah,
and he likes to do that. It's different for him, and although his choice of material, in my opinion, is a little. You see, he wasn't even born when the American hair metal invasion happened in England and everything it stood for. So my distaste of the whole thing is quite apparent from what I say. But having said that, when I go along to see them play, which you've got to do, and when I go along to see them play, they do the songs so well that it's not them that I have a problem with, really. It's if it hadn't have been Mötley Crüe, and so on, it would have been someone else, you
yeah,
know. So Mötley Crüe, Twisted Sister, whoever, it would have been something else that destroyed metal. Then it was kind of imploding on itself anyway,
yeah,
and it was kind of dying out because the record companies were turning their backs on the bands. So maybe in a crazy way, although it was the death knell for British metal, per se, it actually kept metal of some kind in the public eye for many years after, which is not a bad thing, really. I mean,
yeah,
joking aside, uh, I do quite a lot of Motley Crue stuff, particularly Wild Side. I think it's a great song,
hmm,
and I quite like a lot of Bon Jovi's earlier stuff as well.
yeah,
So I think to give the impression that that I really dislike it is wrong. I dislike what it did
yeah.
to the
Fair
Ameri-
enough.
to the England sort of heavy metal scene, but the actual bands themselves, they're only doing what bands do. They're filling a gap. They see an opportunity, and they came over here and played, and that was accepted by the masses. But possibly a lot of bands, or that might not have been noticed by people before, like they were, like you'd have an audience that probably wouldn't have listened to heavy metal, but then Bon Jovi came and made it acceptable,
Hmm,
you know,
hmm.
in their own way. But that's again, I I do apologize. I do tell once I get off on a tangent, I do waffle a lot.
Fair enough. Well, listen, it's been great chatting with you. What's in store for Satan? Anything new coming up in the near future? I mean, obviously your focus is going to be mainly Blitzkrieg, at least for the next little while. But
Yeah,
anything going on with Satan at all?
yeah. I mean, there's quite a lot coming up. I mean, we've finished the album now. That is ready for release in September.
Oh,
Um,
there's another
so
Satan album coming out.
oh yeah, there's a new album coming out in September. It's in the can, as they say.
Uh huh.
It's all complete. It's finished. It's ready to go. So we didn't want to release it at the same time as the Blitzkrieg album because obviously I would have to. It would make it a lot of hard work for me.
Yeah, fair
Um,
enough.
so so what we're doing is the Blitzkrieg album's coming out. Then we're out on tour across Europe. And then after the European tour, the Satan album comes out, and I go out. I'm coming over to America with Satan to play some gigs over there. So um, that's kind of how we're splitting it up, and it's working at the moment. So that's really cool.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening with Satan right now. We've just done a photograph session. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. It's the kind of area where people say, "Oh, you've not done anything for a while." Well, yes, we have. You just haven't seen us
Yeah.
because there's an awful lot going on behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis where we're in touch with each other constantly. We've got some new artwork. What do you think of this? There's a single coming as well. The first single from Satan since 1981 or two, whatever it was. I can't remember when it came out. But Blitzkrieg's had a single out as well, and that was the first one since 1981. So yeah, I mean, we're all both bands are out there with and quietly doing things behind the scenes, rehearsing, and doing photo sessions and interviews as well, because I've got time on my hands now.
Yeah, well, I certainly do appreciate your time today, Brian. It's been awesome chatting with you on all kinds of subjects. So, like I said, I appreciate it, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, man. Well, I guess over there it's going on 10 o'clock. So you have a good night, sir.
And you.
Right on.
Okay, man. Really nice speaking to you.
Yeah, you too, man. Bye bye.
Okay, man. Bye bye now.